Hi, I'm John Morellis, and I've put together this little slideshow slash video to demonstrate the effect of various lighting modifiers on a studio flash. And a lighting modifier is nothing more than something that you put in front of or around your flash to modify the effect of that flash. So you can make it bigger, smaller, tighter, you can focus it, there's all sorts of things you can do. Now before I get started, I'm going to share with you my websites. I have my johnmorellis.com website, and that's my commercial and fine art website. And you can find a lot more examples of work that I've created using lighting. And you can also find instructional videos, my lookbooks, and other resources for photographers on photographerstoolkit.com. So without that out of the way, usually you would see my smiling face on a video, but instead you get to see a picture of me playing guitar, and you can pretend that I'm playing guitar and look just like that as I'm talking. So the modifiers that I'm going to test in this slideshow were used to create images such as this fashion image, this image of Miss California for a magazine, this simple portrait of an outrigger paddler, or this family portrait, this family grouping. All of these images have a slightly different look, and most of them have some have a couple lights. The first one had a few, but it's just how the lights are used that creates the different effects. So with that, the first thing we need to know is what is the effect that these lights have on the subject. And to do that, to learn that, I started with a basic reflector. So in the center here, you have the flash tube, and then you have the reflector placed around it. And what that does is it sort of concentrates the light into one area to keep it from blasting all over the place. And so here's what it looks like, not necessarily in use, but this is what it looks like against the gray backdrop that I used. And just in case you have questions, this is the battery pack or the power pack that I used. It's a battery operated ProPhoto 7B power pack, and I used Pocket Wizards to fire this power pack. And here's my backdrop, and this backdrop was lit using the reflector on the flash. And notice how there's a very bright kind of hot spot off to the left side, and that's one effect of the just using a reflector, is it tends to create a hot spot. And so here is this modifier used on our subject. Inga here was kind enough to volunteer to be my guinea pig. And notice they talk about this kind of lighting being very hard. And what hard refers to is, and I'll zoom in a little bit, hard lighting versus soft lighting is a function of the edge between shadow and highlight. And the more diffuse this edge is, the softer the lighting is. The more abrupt this change is, the harder the lighting is considered. So this is considered hard lighting because there's a very abrupt edge here. Okay, next we're going to take a look at the beauty dish. Beauty dish is one of my favorite light modifiers. It's pretty easy to set up, fairly compact, and it's useful in a lot of different situations. The beauty of the beauty dish is that it's very efficient. It gets a lot of the light on the subject. And so here's what it looks like in use. And so here I took a photo of the backdrop, and notice we don't have quite the hot spot that we did with just the reflector. It's a little bit more diffused. There's still a hot spot there, but it's actually been lessened. The beauty dish is kind of evening out the distribution of light, so that you're not going to have such a tight hot spot. And here it is in use. Still a fairly hard light. Now I should say that I placed all of these for this, the position of the lighting is constant. It's slightly to the left of the subject. It's like 45 degrees to camera left of the subject. So here we are a little bit tighter, and now we can begin to see there's actually a little bit more of a diffused transfer from shadow to highlight. And so here we can see it. It's not as abrupt as it was with the bare reflector. Okay, so now we're going to move on to an umbrella. This is about a 36-inch umbrella. It's fairly large. And here it is from the back. And here it is in use. And notice now the hotspot has kind of moved from off to the left. We've got this hotspot right in the middle here. And it's actually a fairly large hotspot. It's not as tight as the just the bare reflector. And here it is in use. And here's a shot that I converted to black and white, played with a little bit, and you can see, you know, with just one light source, we can actually create a fairly dramatic effect here. This is something that could be in a magazine. It wouldn't necessarily be a beauty shot, like if we want to make our model look beautiful, like in a cosmetic ad or something like that. But something maybe with a little bit more of an edge. You can see it's a little bit more dramatic. But you can also see we're starting to get a little bit more of a diffused transition from shadow to highlight. Okay, next up is the popular softbox. This is, I believe, a 3-foot softbox. It's made by Chimera. Chimera is the only brand I use. I've used a number of brands. Most of them are fairly cheap and not well put together. The Chimera is very sturdy, and it's the standard in the movie industry. So we've got a slight hotspot in the center here, but you notice it's actually fairly even across the face, or across the backdrop. And notice now we're getting some nice diffused transitions from shadow to highlight. Notice that the shadows are still dark. The shadows in all of our photos have been fairly dark, and that's because we have no fill light. We only have one light at 45-degree angle, at a 45-degree angle, but there's no light coming in from any other direction. So the lighting here is it's high contrast, but now it's a little bit softer. And so here we can see it. So now as we look at this transition from shadow to highlight, we can see it's much more gradual, and it's a little bit more difficult to tell kind of where that transition is taking place, especially across the bridge of the nose right here. You can see how it's very gentle, very gradual. And that's going to tend to provide a more flattering light when you don't have those hard, harsh lines being cast that tend to pick up all the pores and imperfections in the skin. And so here's the close-up. And again, we can see we're starting to get more of a nice soft edge, and particularly here across the cheek. Notice how it's very gradual in that transition. Next up is a ProPhoto 5-foot giant reflector. ProPhoto makes these in two sizes. One is a 5-foot, the other is a 7-footer. The 7-footer is great because it's so large. And what makes this different from a regular umbrella, besides the price, a regular umbrella is about $50. This umbrella, I believe, is about $1,100. So there's over $1,000 price difference. The difference is the construction. This is a very heavy-duty constructed umbrella, but also the shape of the umbrella is such that it really it creates an even distribution of light from one side of the umbrella to the other, so that there's no hot spot running across the face of this umbrella, and that makes for a very large, effective light source. So here it is in use. And again, we can see the softness, the diffused transition from highlight to shadow. And all these images are straight out of camera, so except for this one, which I converted to black and white. And you get a sense of the effect. Now, again, it's still high contrast light because we have no fill light here. But notice how large the light is in the eyeballs. and that's going to give us an idea of just how large the light is relative to the subject. Alright, now we've got a ring light, a ring flash, and the ring flash attaches, you can see here, there's a little base attachment that attaches to the base of my camera, and then the lens slips right through here. So it creates this ring of light right around the lens. And now you notice there's no shadows whatsoever. It's a very, very hard light because the edge, to the extent that there's any shadows, is very, very harsh. Now notice this sort of halo created around the subject, and that's the shadow from the ring light on the backdrop. You can create that through Photoshop, but if you shoot this with if you shoot your subject 2 feet or so away from the backdrop, this is the lighting that you're going to automatically create. Whenever you see this, you know that here's an image that was shot with a ring flash. Very hard lighting, has a unique sort of feel to it. It's kind of fun, it's great for punchy colors. Now for this last series, what I did is I combined the ring flash with the Profoto giant reflector. And now what you can see is we've got less contrast, and in the shadows aren't quite so dark, and so overall it creates for more pleasing, more flattering look on our subject. So we've got nice gradual transitions from highlight to shadow, and then the shadows aren't quite so deep. They're a little bit opened up. It's still dramatic, but not overly dramatic. And here's converted to black and white. And notice the kind of the soft feel to this, the open feel to the lighting. We still have shadows, but they're not quite so harsh. And it feels like we've got a very large light source here. That's because we've got our Profoto beauty dish close by, and then we've got nice fill from the ring light. And here it is up close. And if you look in the eyes, you can see here, you can see there's the large light source of the Profoto giant reflector, and there's this tiny dot from the ring flash. And that's it for the Photographer's Toolkit. This is John Morellis.